Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode on Fit as a Fiddle. Our guest today is the wonderful Heather McFadden. Heather is an international board certified lactation consultant, or IBCLC. She's been doing this for over 10 years. She works at a New York City hospital. She also has a private practice that is thriving. She teaches prenatal breastfeeding classes. She has even published an article. She's part of the Leche League Leader, and she is a member of the New York Lactation Consultants Association. Heather does it all. She is your lactation lady. And on a personal note, when my baby was born last May, she was the one who came over in the hospital and helped me with latching and all the questions that I had with breastfeeding. So I am ever so grateful for Heather. I had an amazing experience with her, and it only made sense that we talked about lactation on this season of Fit as a Fiddle. So welcome to the episode, Heather.
Thank you so much. And it was so nice to meet you at the hospital. I do remember just walking in and there was just this ambiance of calm and absolutely beautiful family that I came upon. And I just wanted to stay there all day with you.
And then we
Yeah.
started vibing about dancing and our dance
Yes,
backgrounds
yes,
and my husband's
yes,
dance background. And we had all these
exactly.
maternity dance shoot pictures. And,
Yeah,
that's how it happened. And then we were like,
yeah,
yeah, we need to talk.
very, very much so. Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. All right. So, Heather, for listeners who may not know who you are, can you give us a little bit more of a background on what led you into this field and all the various things that you're doing right now?
Yeah. So as you said, I used to be a professional dancer and singer. Did it for most of my life, started as a child. And as I was getting older in the field, uh, dancing takes a toll on the body. And I always knew that I was going to have to transition. Dancers know this. I just never really knew what it was going to be, but I knew I liked to teach dance. So I was performing full time in Phantom of the Opera. And decided it was time for me to get my undergrad because dancers don't typically do that. They go right into their field because of the prime years being in the late teens and early 20s. So I did not get my undergrad. So there I was in Phantom performing with two children, getting my undergrad because I thought, well, I would like to transition into being a teacher. And if I really want to change my hours to be with my children, I would like to teach at a university. So I got to get the undergrad. While I was getting the undergrad, I was learning, oh, they're going to ask for a master's too. And I was like, oh, I had already, maybe I had already begun the undergrad when I was pregnant with my second, but with my first, and was doing breastfeeding, it was very, very difficult in the beginning. And it really didn't shape up until about 3 months. But once it did, it was so easy. And it was so, not that, this is everyone's path, but I loved what I was learning along the way. And then to finally get to the other side where it's like, wow, this is what I thought that it was going to be. Um, and I was so intrigued by it that I was like, I wonder if there's something there. So my administrator with my undergrad program had shared that if we get certificate hours for any kind of conferences and workshops, let's say you're going to get a Pilates certificate, you can apply those hours towards the undergrad degree. And I was like, well, I'm going to start going to some conferences. And I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. I went to one conference and the next day I wanted to go back to the more clinical one. I was like, how do I do this? And so it just sort of unrolled from there that I realized, oh, I do love to teach dance, but it takes a lot of energy to speak to children for hours. And the lactation work was just intriguing me. I already knew that I loved it or let me rephrase that I wanted to help others with it because once my daughter and I kind of got past our hurdles, my friends started to have children and they would call me and say, oh, it just really hurts or, oh, I've got an infection. Here's what you do. And I get all excited um, about how to help them. And I would be laying in bed at night thinking about them and their breastfeeding difficulties. And I was like, I guess I just like to help friends. But then their friends would kind of email, hey, you helped so and so, and I was getting all excited about helping strangers too. And that's when I knew that this was something probably that I was going to enjoy doing. And I could not wait to get started. It was a couple of years of training um, to become an IBCLC, an International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. You have to do supervised clinical hours, of which you have to be with a certified consultant, following them around on their consults, either in a hospital or private, or their classes that they're teaching, or breastfeeding clinics, and have them kind of watch what you do, and basically a mentor. I had 5 mentors because I wanted to get to this as quickly as possible, and I've always just been very driven. It's like once I start something, I got to keep going until it's over. So I didn't want it to drag on for 10 years, and it can. Um, so I just couldn't wait to jump into the field. I stopped at Phantom in June, took my exam late June or early July, and had the whole summer to get my website together for my private practice and all my materials, so that when I got the results, it does take 4 months to get the results. When I got those results, the next day, one of my mentors said, "Hey, do you want to go see twins tomorrow?" Twins for my first consult. Um, of course I do. And that's how it started. My private practice took off, um, I think really quickly for somebody who had just started. I feel very fortunate that my um, mentors were already very well established in the field, and they were kind of looking to sort of pull back a little bit. So I got a lot of their overflow of work. Do you want to see this person in Queens? And I was willing to go everywhere and anywhere because I wanted to do it so badly. And the private practice grew very quickly, until I found myself one of the top, 5 to 10 people who got called all the time. So that was really, really wonderful. I feel extremely lucky for someone who was in performing arts to have had such a passion for that for my entire life, to have been able to transition to a different field that I felt just as passionately about. And I never thought that I would love anything as much as dancing and singing on the stage. So I just feel so lucky that this part of my life, um, I found something that also spoke to me in such a way, because I think that that's rare.
Love
Um,
that so much. I love it. I
yeah,
love it.
yeah.
That's such a beautiful story, and it's so clear that you're so passionate about it, and not only the way that you speak about it, but also in your work too. And at least for listeners, I had the opportunity to experience that. So I'm very lucky, and I'm happy that there are people in this world who just really do love what they do. And I think when it comes to
Mm,
a lot of birth work, have to you have to love what you do. It's not like a desk job where you can kind of just like detach completely, work 9 to 5, and like completely forget about it. Like there's so much involved with not only in the moment, but also you have to keep up with all the research and the literature, and like
mm,
stay on top of everything that you need to know and be able to provide for your clients and your patients continuously, like throughout
mhm,
the course of your time in that career. So I love that so much. And I'm so happy that you found something equally that you love, like dance. And the same thing for
yeah.
me. I felt the same way when I got into PT. I was like, wow, it's movement, and kind of like what you
Mhm,
were saying, like in at least when we in conversations in the past about like this dance between the mom and the baby. It's kind of like
yes,
that, right? It's
yes,
like for
yes.
a person
Yeah.
who's navigating that environment, it's like most of these things are about movement. It's about how are we
Mhm.
holding our bodies in space, and how are we moving in relationship with ourselves and other things around us or other people around us, right?
Yes, not just physical. I mean, of course I love the physical aspect of it, but I
Mhm.
have, I have some families who are not as comfortable in their bodies or holding a baby. And so, yes, that's fun to kind of work with, a parent to try to help them feel more comfortable with how they're holding the baby. But it's also, yes, the movement of life, and this huge transition, and how um, strangely a lactation consultant being in the room is even helping navigate that, because we're getting asked questions that sometimes don't have anything to do with breastfeeding. and I'll always say, this is something for the pediatrician, but I found that, with my babies, or try not to talk about myself too much because nobody really wants to hear about that. But I think that brand new parents do look to parents who are more experienced for what happened with you, just eager for that information. And so it is fun to be a part of that transition, or helping them move from this expectation of what it's going to be like to what it actually is like, and how that works and fits into their life as a new family.
I love that. What are some of the craziest questions that you've gotten from new families? Because you really see people, at least like at the hospital, like when everything is like, whoa, what the heck just happened? You see people in like that, like very crucial, like coming like right out of like what could be the most beautiful, chaotic thing of their life. So
Mhm.
what do they say?
I mean, and I on the spot, I can't remember some of the craziest. I bet my husband remembers them because my memory is not as good as his. But common things that seem a little less like having to do with breastfeeding might be, um, why won't the baby sleep? That's the most common. Why does the baby wake up every time we put it in the bassinet? That doesn't really have too much to do with breastfeeding. Sometimes we'll get asked about the umbilical cord. Sometimes we'll get asked, uh, why does, let's see, the baby just, yeah, I can't think of too many right on the spot. I get a lot of questions about burping. Now, yes, of course, that does have to do with feeding. But I think as parents and over the decades, we, for some reason or another, have become obsessed with burping. And how that correlates to spit up. I'm not really clear that spit up and burping are always related. We know that it's called a LES, lower esophageal sphincter, is immature in babies. It doesn't close all the way. And so spit up comes up a lot. Milk will come up. And so it's a very natural thing. That's why everyone gives little burp cloths for new parents. And I know that parents are very afraid to put the baby down until the baby's had a burp because they might spit up. And I kind of just educate a little bit. Again, I don't know the ins and outs of exactly all how that works with the digestive system, but I do know that babies spit up in their bassinets or their cribs. I know that babies will burp and then spit up after, even if they're upright. And the positioning for burping is, at least what I was taught from one of my mentors, is actually less, or how you burp the baby. Do you pat? Do you do the circles? Are we doing it right? But really, it's just bringing the baby upright that helps the air move upwards. And all the other techniques around it might be actually completely unrelated. And then I always just like to phrase it as, if you don't get a burp, it's because the baby doesn't have one. I love to try to share with parents that babies are people. They're not like our dogs or our cats. They're people. And sometimes if we just, that old saying, put yourself in someone else's shoes. If we sometimes put ourselves in the shoes of the baby, we could realize, oh, right, I don't always burp after a meal. Sometimes I'm more uncomfortable. Sometimes I'm really content and I can fall right to sleep. Sometimes I'm more gassy. Sometimes I'm more hungry, less hungry, because they eat so many times in a day, 8 to 12 times. Um, they might have these variations throughout. And so babies are in that's one reason they can be very unpredictable to us as parents. So the burping thing comes up all the time. Am I doing this right? Of course you are. The baby's upright, and that's probably all you have to do. Well, I can't seem to get a burp out. And I always like to say, it's not there. The baby doesn't have one.
Yeah, I
Simple.
love that. I really love it. And what's funny, Heather, is I asked the same question to our pediatrician. And it's an office of pediatricians with more than one person there. So we actually wanted to have, like, when we went in like every week, the first couple of weeks, and we had like random things happen. So we basically were there once a week, the first month. We wanted to see different practitioners just to like get different opinions. And that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what we got, especially when we asked questions surrounding sleep, feeding, and burping. People will give us slightly different answers. Um, like one pediatrician would be like, there's absolutely no reason to burp at all. And then the other one would be like, and make sure it's firm and hard and in this particular position. And we'd be like, oh, interesting. And the similar, I guess not such a stark difference, but similar-ish things around feeding. Like some pediatricians will be like, just you keep breastfeeding, it's like you're doing great, like, or like just keep feeding the baby whenever the baby's hungry, like, and then the other ones would be like very, very particular, like, at this hour, these are the
Mm.
times that you want to do the feeding to make sure the baby's gaining weight, blah blah blah. And then the same thing around sleep. Like we would ask
Mhm.
questions around sleep, and then some people will be like, I guess everyone would always say that every baby is different, of course, and they'll always
Mhm.
say like it just depends. Your baby is going to be different than other babies, but they'd be like, you got to stretch the feeding, let them get like full enough or hungry enough, and then so they can eat more, and then they can sleep longer. And then some people were really big about doing formula right before sleeping to sleep longer. Some
Mhm.
people were like, that's not normal. If you were breastfeeding fine, you don't need to do that. So again, I don't know what your thoughts are on all this, but we would get so many different things. And of course, all of our friends told us so many different things. All the internet tells us so many different things.
Mhm.
And I know that
Yes.
everybody has their own journey, and every baby is different, and every family is different, and everyone's needs are different. But I'm just curious because I know you just talked about burping, and I know that feeding is just such an important part of that dyad between the birthing individual and the baby. And sometimes there's a lot of emotions around like, am I doing
Mm.
this right? Or am I giving the baby enough milk? How do I tell? Should I pump and bottle feed? Does that lose connection? At least these are a lot of the
Mm.
thoughts that went through my head as a new mom. And I'm
Mhm.
just curious, what are your thoughts? Like, what has been your experience? You've been doing this for so long. You've seen so many families. I'm sure being in New York City across all cultural diversity backgrounds and all of that stuff, all different kinds of ethnic groups, all different kinds of
Mhm.
expectations. So I'm just curious, what are kind of like the fundamentals of breastfeeding that you feel like everybody should know about in terms of like at least those initial few days and few weeks when they're building that relationship?
Yeah, so the fundamentals are we know that majority of babies need to eat a minimum of 8 times in 24 hours. And I think that most pediatricians will say that too, especially in the beginning, every 2 to 3 hours. We know breastfeeding babies will cue to eat even more than that. So we try to, uh, for expectation, say it could be 8 to 12, and some might be even more. The reason being that the babies do tend to feed more than 8 times at the breast is because, oh gosh, there's so many reasons. Um, Breastfeeding is not just about food for a baby. Um, it's this whole biological, emotional, it's survival, one, right? So that would be the food element. But then if we also think about the survival of the baby needing to be near a parent, held, we're one of the few mammals that need to have that continuous warmth, and the human body, the parent can warm up a baby and help them regulate their body temperature, their heart rate, their blood sugar levels, and of course, when they're held, their stress levels get lowered. So they're smart. Babies are smart, and so they will come to the breast and want to be right near it, and will sleep better on a parent's chest or actually suckling, because it's a mode of survival. So as we talk about, yes, and I talk about it all the time. At least 8 times, could be 8 to 12 times in a 24-hour period. But that's just about the food part for gaining weight. But then there's the babies who can't be put down in the bassinet or in the crib because they want to be next to a parent. So I try to normalize that too, and explain why the baby needs to be there. We also think that babies want to be at the breast because they're thirsty. And I certainly have seen babies want to be suckling um, when they're having a little tummy pain. Either they're trying to figure out that burp, or they've got the hiccups, or they're trying to figure out how to go to the bathroom because this is a new experience that they're feeling out of the womb. And it's very disconcerting. And what makes them feel the best is to be right up against the breast and suckling. Um, so that's kind of the fundamentals for certainly for growth, but then also why a baby would need or desire to be at the breast so much. Um, when it comes to, I would say definitely in our Western society and a lot of, cultures that I come across, I would say the majority of people that I see in New York City, um, we have become so driven by social media and data and getting the information, you're right, on the internet. And I think what sometimes happens, I know what happens, we start to say, well, the doctor said every 2 to 3 hours. And yeah, well, the lactation consultant said more, but every 2 to 3 hours. And maybe the baby nurse might come and say every 3 hours, and I'll hold the baby until then. I could go off on so many tangents. There's so much that we could talk about. Um, and so we're looking at the schedule, we're looking at a time, and babies don't understand time. They just know their needs. And as parents, what I try to encourage is try to get to know your baby, not necessarily the clock or what that information is out there, even the one that I gave, a minimum of 8 times. What's happening? What is your baby telling you? And especially if your baby is only calming down when you pick it up and hold it, that's what the baby needs. Do it. Do it. If it's speaking to you, I don't like to hear my baby cry, but every time I put it down, it starts crying. But I was told, that I shouldn't spoil it. I shouldn't pick it up. It's because that's our instinct, I think, for a lot of parents is to not allow the baby to cry. And so if you want to pick up your baby to help it, pick it up. If you want to feed your baby, because that seems to be the only thing that calms it down, do it. So if I can sometimes try to get parents away from the apps, away from timing the feeding, away from even timing on each breast, because that doesn't really tell me how much the baby's getting. The app, you can start and stop. So right side I did for 12 minutes and the left side I did for 10. And at the end of the day, we breastfed for 244 minutes. And I'm like, I can't do the math. I don't know what that means. Watch what your baby is doing. And if your baby is on a side and starts to slow down, and you can use the clock as a little guide, see, oh, it has been a little while. We have been here for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And the baby's not really doing much because you're using your instinct. You look down and mostly sleeping. Okay, now you can maybe switch to the other side. And then I like to say on the other side, baby might start to slow down and actually fall asleep. That's called comfort nursing. And comfort nursing is normal. And it's actually one of the, if I speak personally for a second, one of the most memorable and favorite times in my life was holding a snuggling baby at the breast when I knew that they were well fed and they just, they wanted to stay there. My kids wanted to stay there and I wanted to stay there. I wanted it to linger there forever because it's not going to be forever. So I will say it's absolutely fine. Comfort nursing is normal and it's beautiful. You don't have to do it. Sometimes we want to go just brush our teeth. Go brush your teeth. It's okay to slip the baby off, but comfort nursing is natural, normal, and it's okay to do. Um, so I don't know if I answered your question. Fundamentals about feeding times, and then I went into the tangent of just kind of where I like to sort of guide parents towards getting to know their baby. And maybe I wrap up that question with all that information that is out there might be tidbits of it, might be helpful for your baby, or it might be helpful for a day or a couple of days before the baby switches and is on to another pattern. But take each bit of information, apply it, try it. If it's not working, it's because your baby is its own person, its own human, and um, you know it best. So use your instincts as parents.
I
And
love that.
all of the rest of what everybody says, um, take it in, try it, see if it works. But if it doesn't, it's not that anybody is necessarily wrong or that you're doing something wrong. You're just navigating your little person as they're changing constantly.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that you will agree when sometimes breastfeeding doesn't work for various reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's not the
Mm-hmm.
best option, even if it's more of an emotional thing than or a mental block than it is a physical block, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
how do you help patients and clients who I guess want to breastfeed, but feel like there are enough hindrances that they feel like they should stop, or there's a medical need to stop, or whatever there is to stop doing it, especially
Mm-hmm.
earlier on when you're still building that connection with the baby? How do you help them navigate through ending breastfeeding?
Yeah, there are reasons why some um, parents are not uh, going to breastfeed. Now, some don't want to, but they feel pressured to do it, either by their partner or grandma or society. They feel societal pressures to do it. And I certainly try to ask those questions too. If I sense that the person is kind of not enjoying it, I will ask some specific questions to try to get them around to what they want to do. And then we have those, parents that really want to do it, but it's not necessarily improving. I I think that when things are not improving, and yet parent has taken all the steps to try to get that to happen, and it's not moving forward, and they're starting to find themselves extremely unhappy. um, a change needs to be made. So I'll give an example. There's health reasons, medications, things like that, but let's say I'm working with a mom who's working on her milk supply, and she's formula feeding, feels really guilty about that, and is doing everything that I've suggested. I'm suggesting to pump after each breastfeeding session. Try some herbs with the permission of your doctor. Do a power pumping session, massage the breasts at the same time, feed the baby, do skin to skin. And things are not really changing, and there's not uh, so much milk that makes it feel uh, worth it to the mom. I can't tell someone that if you're getting 2 ounces a day, that that's not worth it, because any breast milk is good for the baby. But for the parent who is doing that work, it has to feel good to them. So I always put it in their court. And I'll say, we know fundamentals, the first 4 to 6 weeks is when milk supply is increasing more easily. It can still increase after that, but it just gets a little bit harder. So if we're at week 4, I can share that information. Do you feel exhausted? Yes, I'm exhausted. I don't know if this is going to, change much more. I don't know if I can do this much more. And I'll go, okay, let's look at, uh, can you do it for another week? Or can you do it until 6 weeks? Because we're in that window. And if you tell me no today, we're going to work on down regulating the supply, or I don't even say that. I say, we're going to look at some other options. And so sometimes that can give the parent the motivation to kind of, yeah, let's try this for another 2 weeks. I'll be okay. Um, but sometimes they're ready. They're ready to stop. And I don't say the word stop. I'll just say, here are some options. You can continue to put the baby to the breast if baby is latching, and then you offer the formula after, and you no longer pump. And that's called mixed feeding. And I let them know people all over the world do that. And that's perfectly reasonable. The baby's getting some breast milk, the baby gets formula to get a full meal, and you don't have to pump. And you can now start to think about spending more time with the baby without all this pumping that you've been having to do. It's a compromise, and I say it's a valid compromise. And then I'll say there's another option. You could just pump and bottle feed, whatever you get with your pumping, and use formula as needed. And you could also stop it altogether and just formula feed. These are options that only the parent can decide. But I kind of lay that out and just kind of sit back and say, we don't have to decide today, but I'm going to be available for you when you make a decision, and email me. And I think that every situation is a little bit different, and it can be a very emotional thing for a parent who has had this desire to provide just breast milk, or to keep the breastfeeding relationship, or wanted that breastfeeding relationship. It can take an emotional toll on some, not all for sure. And I just try to be there for that, and mostly just listen. That's because it can't always change what's happening. So I just try to listen and let them know that there are plenty of families out there who have experienced some of the same things. They're not alone with that. And then I like to wrap it up with, the most important thing is that your child be loved and cared for, and you're already doing that by holding your baby and feeding your baby and giving it what it needs, not just in food, but in love. You're already doing that. You are already a good parent. You are already a good mom. It's simple as that, right?
Yeah.
You're picking up your baby and putting it here to calm down. You're changing a diaper. You're already a good parent and
Yeah.
doing what you can for the baby.
I think there's a lot of, like you just said, a lot of pressure on being like a good mom and doing the right things at the right time. And especially as a new parent, like as much as you can read, you can take all the childbirth education classes you want. You can talk to every single friend who's had a child in different times of the world and different eras. And you still, like, that experience is so unique to every individual that
Mm-hmm.
you're going to go through it. And I think that there is a lot of pressure on what to do or not to do, or
Mm-hmm.
ways in which you must do things. And I think a lot of things are also said, right? Like when you talk to somebody, like everybody who's pregnant gets all this advice that's just like
Mm-hmm.
never asked for, and like nobody ever asked you, but then people will just come up to you and just tell you things. And I
Mm-hmm.
always found that very jarring, Heather, honestly. Like there would
Yeah.
be people who would message me and be like, your life is never going to be the same again, or like even when I remember being in college, and I don't know, we just somebody started talking about breastfeeding, and I remember one of my professors was like, yeah, it feels like somebody's like slamming the window on your nipple and just crushing it. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so violent. In my head, I was like, wow, okay. But if people say these things, right? Like people
Mm-hmm.
have these
Mm-hmm.
like just things that they say about being pregnant, or their childbirth experience, or postpartum recovery, or how their experience was with breastfeeding, or their first time changing a diaper. And everyone's experience is so different. But I think it's very important that if you are in that receiving end, to just, like you said, take it in, keep it in your brain if you want, and just let go of it if it doesn't serve you. Because there's
Mm-hmm.
plenty of things that people said to me that I was just like, oh my God, I'm so
Mm-hmm.
sorry that you had the worst experience ever and that you're super traumatized. And I totally get it. But
Yes.
I'm like,
Yeah.
didn't ask you.
Yeah.
I
It's
don't need
kind
to
of
know.
it's kind of like and to put it simply, my daughter talks about as she's navigating coming into adulthood, and you've got your friends, and you start to like spill your heart about the breakup with your boyfriend, and the person who's across from you just starts saying, yeah, I know, because when I did this and that, it was this and that, and so this is what you should do. And it's like, oh, but my experience is mine, and I was hoping to just kind of just vent a little, or just say that this was going. I didn't necessarily need the feedback, and certainly the kind of feedback of what happened to you and how that's going to inform me of what I should do with my situation. That's
Mhm.
just basic, what we want, I think, is people, when we're connecting with friends and others. We want to be heard, and um, have our own experience. And I think just in all things, if we can sometimes take a little step back and do that for each other. Um,
Yeah.
Breastfeeding, parenthood, pregnancy, relationship.
Yeah.
I get too deep, see.
No, but it's true, right? It's like breastfeeding is like such like as much as I don't want to like overrate it or underrate it, it's
Mhm.
just a unique experience. Some people like I know one day when I stop feeding Gia, like when I stop breastfeeding her, I'm probably gonna like sob my eyes out for a week. Like I already know because I think about it and I'm already like, oh my God, one day. So
Yeah.
that's me, right? But
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
know that there are other people who are like, keep that baby as far away
Yeah.
from me as
Yeah.
possible. Do not come near me. This is my body. I feel
Yeah.
very violated. The birth was already
Yes.
very traumatic or violating, or all the
Yeah.
words that people sometimes use.
Yeah. Exactly.
And for me, I'm like in Gia's face. I'm like, I want to eat your face. She's like, stop, stop. Like she's like swatting me away, and I'm like, I want you. Come here.
Yeah.
I'm like
Yeah.
nuzzling my
I
head in
want to
her
eat.
neck,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I'm all about that like physical
Yeah.
connection. And so for me, breastfeeding just I love it. I love doing it.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
love being with her, but I can't always say that in front of everyone because
That's
if they
right.
didn't ask me or if they didn't feel that, I'm not going to sit here and talk about that. And vice
Hmm.
versa too. If I had a
Hmm.
really bad experience with something,
Hmm.
whatever it is, pregnancy wise, I'm gonna literally like I have like 20 friends who are pregnant. Like some of them are like my closest childhood friends too.
Mm.
And so everyone as a pelvic floor PT, I am like doing free telehealth all night long every day.
I'm sure.
And
I'm
so,
sure.
they're like telling me all these things, but I'm like, I'm trying to be very careful with like, hey, I want you to know this is my experience. This is not what you might feel. And this, I'm just
Mhm.
you're asking me. So I'm going to tell
You're
you, these are
asking.
the things
Hmm.
that I experienced. This is what happened to me. And I literally preface this with like, I know people on two opposite ends of the spectrum too. So
Yes.
whatever happens is going to be unique to you, but this is just what happened to me. And so you can
Hmm.
take that to inform yourself whatever decisions you want to take and be like very, very mindful that you do not have to do anything I tell you to do too. There are some things pelvic floor wise, like you got to do it. But otherwise, like most of like the parent things, like you really, it can go any which way.
Hmm.
It doesn't
Hmm.
matter. And I think
Right.
that breastfeeding is like one of those things, right? Like
Yeah.
you see such a spectrum, like people who are wanting to do it, who are struggling to do it, people who find it very easy and barely
Hmm.
need your help, maybe just to
Hmm.
like get started, but find it very natural. Then there are people who don't want to do it,
Yeah.
but they feel
Yeah.
pressured, right?
Yeah.
There's like so
Yeah.
many types of parents and then like you said, I think a lot of it is society that we're in right now, over information. But I also think that IBC, like so many of my friends and people that I know, even in the healthcare field, didn't even know what an IBCLC was until I
Hmm.
started talking about this kind of work being in the birth field. And it's like, hopefully, people get more information because literally there are people as bright and brilliant and wonderful as you who are like literally there to help you with this very important thing that you're finding challenging. And
Hmm.
sure, the pediatrician might be the first person that you might bring this up to because you're going to see them a few times in the first few weeks, or your OB might be the person you might be seeing them in the first few weeks or months. But the IBCLC is the person who should be helping answer all of your questions because those people are not trained in lactation the way that you
Hmm.
are at
Right.
all. And
Yeah.
sometimes
That's
they're only
exactly true.
speaking from personal experience. At
Yes.
least my pediatrician, my OB, they all spoke, they said something like, I think I showed up to my 6 week appointment. I was like feeding Gia in the appointment. Um, and I had this great conversation with like one of the team, if she wasn't my OB, but like somebody there who was an OB. And she was just talking about her experience. But in my head, I was like, that is not medical knowledge. That is just, you're just telling me a story right now. But a person who wouldn't know any better would take that as medical knowledge.
Yes.
Do you know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yes,
You
I
agree
do.
with that?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, we hear a lot of, and I try not to, do bashing of people, the other fields, because that's just not fair. But I do hear a lot of advice, unfortunately, uh, poor advice, from our doctors in regards to breastfeeding. Um, and, there's things I don't know about, even in my field. If I don't know, nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. I don't know. Let me find that out for you. Or let's ask this person for that information. Ask your pediatrician. I'm not really sure about that umbilical cord. um, you know, it's okay for us to say that. I don't know. And so I'd much rather, a doctor or pediatrician, when they're asked about these questions that are so specific to breastfeeding, that they say, I don't know, ask the lactation consultant. Um, just one quick thing of don't let the, baby snack on the breast. We snack. Again, they're just little people. We don't snack if we're on a diet. I mean, I'm being extreme about that, but if, you come home and like, oh, you smell dinner, but it's not ready yet. And you're like, I've got to have something. You're going to grab a handful of nuts. You're going to grab something and put it in your mouth. Babies do the same thing. And so to tell a parent, and especially when I've seen a baby who's not gaining robustly, is gaining okay, but then they're told not to let the baby snack at the breast. But why not? The baby's going to get more food. The baby's going to gain better. Isn't that the goal? So there's a lot of stuff that we do here sometimes that is not in alignment with what we have been taught and what we've come to know. And yeah, I international board certified lactation consultants have the longest training. It's the most rigorous training. There's other types of consultants out there, certifications. There's certified lactation consultant. Not everybody always needs to have the IBCLC. We have an exam, we have clinical hours, university level courses we have to take. Not everybody always needs, to see an IBCLC. There's less complex cases, and there's a space for that. What I think is not good is when parents don't know what they're getting coming to their home or on the phone with, and if the questions are a little more complicated, because one of the certifications is a 5-day book course. There's no in-person interaction and study. So I think that's a little bit tricky right now. And it's been quite a few years that our field is still trying to navigate that with insurance, with licensure, and trying to get the word out there of what is a lactation consultant and are there differences between, and I'm quite sure that many families still don't know, or even pediatricians, that there are different types of the certificate that's offered. So a little bit tricky. I don't know what to do about that.
Well, and the silly
Yeah.
part about this is if you are a new parent and you are breastfeeding and choosing to breastfeed, you're probably doing that for the majority of the day for weeks. If
Mm,
that is your choice and that is what you're doing, because it can take time. And like you
mhm.
said, 8 to 12 times a day, like Gia snacked for like every 30 minutes when she cluster fed for
Yeah.
like a
Yes.
long time.
Yes.
So you're doing it for very long periods of time. It's very time consuming. So something that's so time consuming, we should try to navigate ways to make it more comfortable for the baby, more comfortable for the mother, more
Mhm.
successful as much as possible, because there's so much science, like power pumping, for example. Like I learned about that a little bit later, and I actually feel like I need to do a couple rounds of that at some point. But there's so many ways that you can boost your milk supply, and like scientific studies and things that have come out on ways that you can optimize breastfeeding overall
Mhm.
and milk. So yeah, I think it's just important to have people like you be a really important part of a new parent's journey. So I'm very grateful for your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anything else today that, Heather, you want to add to our story, or anything you feel like you wanted to share that you haven't gotten a chance to yet?
Um, not really. I would say, yes, let's say baby has just come and things are not perfect yet. That's okay. Baby's learning, the parent is learning. And because I get to see brand new babies as soon as they've been born, to babies, I mean, I even see some up to 11 months, but most are in the first couple of months after. I can confidently say that most of the time the issues get resolved and you get to easier breastfeeding. I never say it's completely easy, because that's just not the case with parenting in general. And the feeding, lots of feeding can be exhausting, but it almost always gets easier. And a lot of the issues in the beginning, even a non-latching baby, they almost always get there in time. And it can be very important to keep that in your mind, not panic. Oh my God, I'm not doing it right. It's not happening. The baby didn't latch. What's going to happen? Ask questions, seek support, and take a deep breath. breastfeeding is a process, and it's not always perfect right off from the get-go.
I love
It's
that.
going to be okay. Even if it doesn't get to be breastfeeding, it's going to be okay.
Yes. And baby's going to be fed, baby's going to grow up, baby's going to do all the things in the world,
It's going to be
and
okay.
it's going to be fine. It's hard to see that when you're a new parent. I can tell you right now that there are so many things that are happening. There are so many things that are new. I'm a very checklist to-do person. So I was like, every single class that I've taken, all of the coursework that I've done, like my professional stuff, like every person like you that I've talked to prenatally, and these kinds of conversations are beyond. I'm like going back, listening to everything, like doing all this stuff. And then the baby comes and I'm like, get this list out of my face. Like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
So it can be so much, but it's also so special. And I remember like, at least my personal experience was those like first 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, like this initial stages, I don't even know how long, they were like the most magical moments of my life. Like I cannot get over how precious they were for us and as a family. And, it partly is because I had a lot of support in the ways that I wanted support, and I made sure to get it, and ask for it. And I had so many people in my field who were offering me help in different capacities. And even if I didn't even need it for most part, just knowing that people were out there to help if I needed help, it was just great. And so I think you would agree that make sure that you reach out to help, like IBCLCs, people out there. Your insurance most likely is going to be covering visits. And so talk to your insurance provider, talk to whoever you need to talk to make sure that you can put your village together before the baby is born. Know the people that you might need help from, whether it's, a doula, a postpartum doula, or an IBCLC, or a baby nurse, or family, if you want that. And your pediatrician should be set up. And any questions to your OB, you don't have to show up at your 6-week checkup. You can go sooner if you need to, right? Like it's like a myth in pelvic floor PT. You don't have to come after a 6-week checkup script from your OB. You can see me day 2 postpartum, like you can see pelvic floor PT. You can see anyone that you need to, if you can find them. Hopefully you're in an area, and people all over the world listen to these shows. So hopefully you're in an area where these services are offered. And honestly, you might be in one that has better ones than here.
True. Very true.
But the point is that it can be very overwhelming. There's a lot going on, but you're doing great, and get the help you need.
Yes.
So
yes, exactly.
amazing. Thank you so much, Heather.
You are so welcome. And thanks for asking me to do this. And it's so nice to see your
course.
face again.
I know. It's been like months, and I still remember like being like, oh, Heather, yay.
I remember what room you were in too, which I don't remember a lot of that at all.
Oh,
But,
that's very sweet.
so nice to hear from you again.
Thank you, Heather.
All right. Take care.